I place Queen Marker Number 27 on the hive just outside his site and release the first swarm. By tonight, his machines won't move an inch. The sun sinks low behind the sea of yellow helmets and orange vests. Construction crews swarm the clearing where my apiary stood yesterday. 16 hives, stacked and humming under canvas covers just last season, are gone, replaced by piles of sawdust and crushed combs. My weathered hands brush ash and broken frames. The sharp scent of smoke clings to my jacket. A foreman steps forward, clipboard in hand, voice clipped. Access denied until further notice. Sites closed for remediation inspection. His legal team watches nearby, faces set. I nod, knees trembling under the weight of loss. No warning. No permit checks before bulldozers tore through. I pull the yellow notice taped to the fence, dated 04/30/24, from my satchel. A city directive forbidding work until environmental assessments were complete. Vale's crews ignored it. Crouching, I sweep broken beeswax from dirt. A few stunned survivors crawl among splintered frames. I scoop them gently into my smoker box, murmuring a low hum of reassurance. Saving these bees is the only fight left until the permit renewal hearing day 60. 60 days to prove I can rebuild legally or lose everything. The legal team's representative approaches, eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. Ms. Harlow, Vale's project complies with all regulations. You'll have your day in court. His tone leaves no room for negotiation. I steady my breath, biting back a retort. My grey hair pulled tight beneath my wide brim hat. My back aches from years of tending hives. But time has taught me endurance. Around me, Vale's crews tighten their perimeter, setting up surveillance cameras and barriers. A new sign reads, "Authorized personnel only." The community I relied on, the farmers who traded me wildflower honey, neighbors who shared water for my bees, won't reach these grounds again without legal clearance. I stand, clutching the metal smoker. The bees inside stir. A flicker of life I must protect. Vale's machines may bulldoze my past, but they cannot erase the knowledge in my hands or the resilience in my spirit. I catalogue damage with my phone, snapping photos of crushed combs, charred wood, and scattered frames. This evidence will be crucial. A call from the city office confirms the hearing date. Day 60. No extensions. I lower my gaze, calculating the narrow path ahead. My mobility is limited, but my resolve is firm. I will gather what survived this assault and rebuild, lawfully, carefully. Without the apiary, I lose my income and the community bonds I've woven over decades. Vale's reckless confidence shows in ignoring posted warnings. But beneath engines' roar and legal threats, the quiet hum of my bees reminds me why I fight. Tonight, the swarm I released will cluster at the fence line, blocking machines. It's a small victory, but the start of resistance. My restored hives will be proof that life can persist here. The clock starts now. 60 days to hold this ground. The sun sank low as I climbed the narrow steps to Mrs. Lang's rooftop, the worn wood creaking beneath my careful steps. Across the way, the faded number 194 marked the closest willing neighbour after nearly a week of asking. My weathered hands gripped a bag of hive boxes, each lined with mesh and lids repurposed from wreckage. I counted the days, 59, until the permit renewal hearing. Every hour spent convincing neighbours meant fewer to prepare my bees for what lay ahead. Mrs. Lang shuffled beside me, her thinning grey hair tied loosely. "I'm uneasy about those bees," she murmured, eyes darting nervously at the boxes. Vale's team keeps spreading stories, dangerous stings and all. Her voice carried the weight of city gossip, fanned by the developer's PR machine. Vale's team had painted my bees as hazards, muddying the waters for my modest apiary's return. I set a box in place, nails biting into weathered wood beneath an orange sky, the old rooftop stark against the modern skyline. My knees protested sharply, each jolt a reminder of age. The bees respond to frequencies, I said softly, fitting protective mesh over the box's opening. We'll train them to recognize the hum of Vale's machines as a signal to be cautious. This method wasn't new, but scaling it up was unfamiliar. Adapt or lose everything. Mrs. Lang nodded slowly, but hesitated. If the bees get restless, what then? What about the kids below? Her gaze flicked toward a playground shaded by a lone oak tree. I understood. That concern anchored my task heavier. I needed more hands, rooftops, trust. But time slipped by. Our rooftop talks stretched into afternoon. One neighbor refused outright, citing potential lawsuits. Another demanded proof bees wouldn't interfere with her vegetable patch. I showed photos of surviving hives, the gentle way bees collect nectar, and evidence that sound conditioning was possible. Slowly, walls cracked. As dusk fell, a neighbor slipped me a small recorder before slipping away. "You should hear this," she whispered. The device played a clipped voice. Gordon Vale, sharp and cold, ordering his team to pressure anyone aiding that old fool. The words raised the stakes. His lawful moves hid veiled threats, pushing my community to doubt and distance. Yet that night, on the rooftops, a shift happened. Mrs. Lang folded her arms. "If we're all in, I'll host a hive." Another voice followed. "Me too." Fragile trust turned to resolve. I breathed deeply, tasting the faint scent of beeswax on my gloves. A stubborn life refusing to yield. I knew the coming weeks would test me. Every box placed was a step to rebuild. Every meeting balanced caution and necessity. Resting my hands on the wooden floor, my eyes traced the horizon where city noise rose. Vale's crews worked behind cameras and signs, but I was not invisible. With 59 days left, I would teach these bees to hear the city's threats, shield my livelihood, and prove that an elder's wisdom could outlast the roar of machines and rumors. The public library's legal archives smelled faintly of dust and old paper, a quiet refuge from the noise outside. I settled at a heavy wooden table under a flickering lamp, spreading out the folders I had retrieved. The clock marked 21 days into my countdown. 57 days remained until the permit renewal hearing. My wrist throbbed, swollen and stiff from the fall while grabbing a folder earlier, but the ache was a price I had to pay. Gordon Vale's bulldozers had torn through my hives without authorization, demolishing 16 colonies in total. His crews moved with a precision that betrayed their confidence. Cameras had appeared overnight around the site's perimeter, aimed to deter anyone documenting further destruction. Vale's legal team filed an injunction this morning, blocking my access to internal permit documents. That move struck hard. Those files were essential if I wanted to prove irregularities in Vale's environmental submissions. My fingers traced the edges of a weathered report, the developer's environmental assessment. I spotted a troubling detail. Dates on the report were inconsistent with city records. The assessment claimed work began after May 15, 2024, but the city directive forbade any construction before April 30, 2024, pending a complete environmental review. That meant Vale's team backdated documents, a serious violation if I could prove it. I paused, rubbing my wrist carefully. The swelling slowed my movements, but my mind pushed through the discomfort. My eyes scanned a legal reference book. A public nuisance clause caught my attention. If bees were deemed a nuisance, construction could be delayed by enforcement actions. The idea was unexpected, but promising. My bees, once targeted by Vale's campaign as dangerous pests, might now justify a legal delay to his bulldozing schedule. A sudden knock at the archive door startled me. I glanced up to see a clerk shaking her head, holding a folded injunction notice. "Sorry, Ms. Harper. The judge signed this 2 hours ago. No access to any documents related to the developer's permit." I nodded, hiding frustration behind calm eyes. "Thank you," I said quietly, folding the paper. Later, back in my small apartment, I spread the documents on the kitchen table. The faint hum of my rescued bees filtered through the screen door, a bittersweet reminder of what was at stake. I began drafting letters to the city council, highlighting the forged dates and the newly found nuisance clause. I attached photos from the site, crushed hives, battered equipment, all evidence of damage. An email alert blinked on my laptop. It was from Mrs. Lang, one of the neighbors hosting relocated hives. "Vale's men came by today," she wrote. "They asked questions about the bees and warned about legal consequences." I frowned, sensing the pressure mounting. Vale wasn't just bulldozing landscapes. He was bulldozing the community's will. Despite the pain and setbacks, I resolved to fight. The ticking clock hung over every decision. 57 days to piece together proof strong enough to halt the destruction. With limited mobility, I relied on neighbors and allies more than ever. Each legal document, every photo, every whispered conversation was a thread in the net I was weaving around Vale's plans. Tomorrow I would return to the courthouse. There had to be a loophole. The public nuisance clause was my best lead. If I could make the city enforce it, I might stall the permit renewal long enough to rebuild my apiary legally. The stakes were high, but surrender was not an option. The chain-link fence rattled sharply as a gust swept through the construction site. I pressed my gloved hands against the cold metal, steady despite wear. A tall yellow sign warned, "Site closed, authorized personnel only." Beyond it, yellow jackets and orange cones outlined freshly dug earth and 6 idle Caterpillar D6Ts, their serial numbers 7ZK4521 through 7ZK4526, visible on the silent machines. The site was frozen, except for a low hum vibrating through the heavy air. Cradled in my weathered fingers was a new hive box, labelled number 19B, dated 05 to 12 to 24, thick with restless bees. The plan was narrow. Release the swarm here to disrupt the groundwork just long enough to secure a delay. I lifted the smoker from my belt, the metal cool and scarred. Pain throbbed in my lower back, dull but persistent. Years of aches were nothing now. With a steady hand, I pulled the top off. A thick cloud of bees billowed out, buzzing loudly, surging toward the bulldozers. Behind me, shouting broke out. The foreman, a bulky man in a yellow helmet, barked sharply, "Get back! They're swarming the equipment!" His clipboard slipped, pages fluttering into the dirt. 2 security guards sprinted toward me, radios buzzing. "Marlene Harper," one called. "This is trespassing." I held my ground, voice calm. These bees belong to the community. A dull stab in my back forced me to shift, steadying myself on the fence. The swarm spread quickly, their buzzing relentless as they wedged into engine vents and track links. The foreman barked orders. "Remove the hives now!" 2 workers approached with smoker cans and nets, but the bees snapped at their hands. One cursed, stumbling backward as the swarm grew aggressive. The foreman lunged at the largest cluster near an excavator. The bees surged at him, relentless. Then came a sick crack, his yell cut short. He dropped his helmet, clutching his right hand, blood blooming between his fingers. His fracture was clear. The crew froze, stunned. The swarm held firm. Security doubled patrols, now walking in pairs every 20 minutes, radios crackling with urgent updates. The delay was immediate. 48 hours of stalled groundwork confirmed by a text from Mrs. Lang. Delay, 40H confirmed. Site stalled. The developer's panic was obvious. The financial damage was mounting fast. I checked my phone. A new message appeared from an unknown number. Permit renewal hearing ID 8109, scheduled E0709-124. Location: City Hall, room 214. Every minute counted. Looking down at the damaged hive box in my hands, crushed combs, dying bees, I felt tangible loss. The carefully nurtured swarm was fractured, a resource diminished. The trade-off was clear. Suddenly, the distant rumble of cameras rolled in. A local news crew arrived, capturing the chaos. The foreman's injury and escalating swarm drew a growing crowd. Flashes from camera lenses lit up the site as the reporter's voice narrated over my shoulder. The trap had sprung wider than planned. The swarm wasn't just a delay. It was becoming public. Gordon Vale's tight control was slipping beneath the buzzing storm. The cost was steep, but leverage was growing fast. My apiary was lost. My next moves had to be sharper. The fluorescent lights in the local TV station's lobby hummed steadily as I settled into the visitor's chair at 1316. The receptionist, a young man with a distracted gaze, handed me a visitor badge after I signed the log. My fingers, weathered and stiff, clutched the badge tightly. I had an appointment with the evening news producer, determined to force the story of my destroyed apiary and the developer's tactics into the public eye. Minutes earlier, I'd handed the producer a flash drive filled with photos showing bulldozers crushing hive boxes and documents highlighting discrepancies in Vale's environmental reports. The clock was ticking. Only 52 days until the permit renewal hearing. I needed the community's voice to rise against Vale's bulldozing plans. The producer's expression was wary. Vale's media team has been pressuring us, she explained quietly. They deny everything and threaten to pull ads. They're framing you as the saboteur. I nodded slowly, the ache in my back sharp, but my resolve steady. The destruction of my apiary was deliberate. Without a legal way to rebuild, my livelihood and neighbours' trust will vanish. Outside the studio window, a crew member carried a box labelled Press Kits, Gordon Vale, a reminder that the developer's influence reached every corner. I set my metal smoker on the table, the cool weight grounding me, a small symbol of the fight ahead. The producer leaned in. "We have something you'll want to see." She loaded a video clip. Faces of neighbours appeared, hesitant at first, then emboldened. They spoke of intimidation. Vale's workers issuing threats during site visits. The footage was recorded secretly. Whispered warnings captured on phone cameras and hidden devices. Mrs. Lang's voice came through, shaky but resolute. "They told us to keep quiet, or we'd lose our homes." Her frail frame was visible, gripping the rail of her rooftop hive. The room fell silent. This was the moment the story broke open. I glanced down at my phone. A fresh wave of angry calls flooded my voicemail. 23 community members outraged, some fearful, others ready to act. The social backlash was immediate. My name was on the line, but so was the truth. Vale's legal team had already issued a public statement denying all allegations. "These claims are baseless," his spokesperson declared, and part of a sabotage campaign. But the neighbours' recording showed a different story, one of coercion and threats. The producer asked, "Will you do an interview tonight?" I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of my years and the strain in my wrist from the injury still tender. Yes, it's time. Outside, construction crews moved cautiously. The swarm released 2 days ago had halted their progress for 48 hours, but the damage to my hives was a loss I could not afford again. My apiary's destruction was more than property. It was a blow to the community's trust and the ecosystem the bees supported. As I left the station, the air was thick with summer heat, and the distant hum of traffic mixed with the faint buzz of bees still lingering nearby. Neighborhood voices were rising, united in a cause that reached beyond my personal loss. The fight was no longer mine alone. The developer's office lobby was stark and sterile, a far cry from the earthy scent of my hives. A digital clock above the reception desk read 11:48 a.m. The polished floor gleamed beneath yellow warning signs taped to the glass walls. Restricted access. No unauthorized entry. My back ached from climbing the building's stairs, and my weathered hands gripped my walking cane tightly. I slipped my metal smoker inside my jacket pocket. Its faint metallic weight was a quiet comfort. At the reception desk, a young security guard in a navy uniform eyed me suspiciously. "Appointments only," he said curtly. I showed him the printed letter from the city inspector confirming my scheduled meeting with the junior engineer. He radioed his supervisor, and after a tense pause, allowed me to proceed under escort. The corridor walls felt narrow and confining compared to the open fields buzzing with bees. My steps were slow but steady. At the door marked "Environmental Compliance, Staff Only," a second guard blocked my path. "No visitors beyond this point," he said firmly. "You'll have to wait here." I pressed my palms to the cold wall, steadying my breath. "I need to speak with the engineer about the noise impact report," I said urgently. My apiary was destroyed because of faulty data. The guard hesitated, then radioed ahead. Moments later, the door swung open, and a slim man with jittery eyes stepped out. He wore a white shirt and held a tablet. "Marlene Harper?" he asked. I nodded, clutching my worn gloves tighter. "I'm Ethan. Follow me." Inside a cramped office, Ethan sat behind a desk cluttered with papers. "The noise report you mentioned. Some of the data was altered," he admitted quietly. "I didn't want anyone to know. They pressured me to minimize the projected disturbances. Gordon's team needed a clean permit." My mouth went dry. "Do you realize what this means? My hives suffered because of that. I have fewer bees than last season." He glanced at the half-empty bottle of water on his desk. "They fired me this morning. Told me not to talk. But I kept copies." Ethan pulled a sealed envelope from his coat pocket and slid it across. My fingers trembled as I broke the seal, revealing internal emails and spreadsheets showing manipulated figures. Suddenly, the door rattled. A sharp voice barked from the hallway. "Ethan, you're done here." The man vanished behind locked doors before I could ask more. I rose slowly, pain radiating through my knees. My weathered skin prickled with exhaustion, but the evidence in my hand was a weapon. The permit review hearing would have to consider this. Back in the lobby, the guards watched closely as I exited. Outside, a construction foreman stood near yellow tape, cordoning off fresh excavation spots. His clipboard showed the date, March 18th. He glanced at me, eyes narrowed but unyielding. Around him, crews paused their tasks. Tension thickened the air. 50 days remained until my permit renewal hearing. My body ached, and the loss of my apiary was a wound deeper than skin. But with this new proof, I could confront Vale's claims directly. My community's future depended on it. The council office smelled of cheap carpet and recycled air. I sat at the worn oak reception desk, clutching a sheaf of papers bound with a faded rubber band, labelled Complaint 3842, Apiary Destruction, 05s 12-24. My left knee throbbed with every minute I waited. The receptionist's computer, an off-brand Dell with sticky keys, showed a queue of 22 pending service requests. I was number 3. Ms. Harper, the complaint is logged, but the hearing is 45 days from today. No extensions, the clerk said, pushing her glasses up the bridge of her nose. I noticed the glare of a flashing "System Update Required" message in the corner of her screen. I nodded slowly. 45 days. The clock was unforgiving. The stack of documents I submitted included detailed photos, GPS coordinates of the destroyed hives, 37.7449 degree 122.41 Nesini 4 degree W, and Ethan's sealed envelope with internal memos from Vale's construction firm. The evidence was solid, but bureaucracy moved like molasses. A man in a sharp grey suit appeared behind the clerk, holding a folder stamped with the city's seal and the date, 06/10/24. Ms. Harper, please be aware the developer has filed a counter-complaint accusing harassment and trespassing. His voice was flat, rehearsed. My pulse remained steady, but my hands, weathered and spotted, curled tightly around the metal smoker in my bag. I could feel the subtle tremor of exhaustion in my stiff wrist. This will delay the permit renewal process, he added. The receptionist's eyes darted nervously. I caught the faint scent of burned coffee from a nearby cup. The trade-off was clear. My effort to file was now tangled in legal crossfire. If the council took Gordon's claims seriously, they might stall or even dismiss my complaint. The apiary's rebuilding permit hung in the balance. Without it, my community ties would fracture, and the honey would end. Behind me, the elevator dinged. I turned to see Mrs. Lang, her thin frame leaning on a cane, eyes shadowed by worry. Marlene, they called. The community meeting's been postponed. They're pushing back again. The weight of every delayed day pressed on my back as I stood, my stiff knees protesting. I moved toward the exit, passing a poster advertising Sustainable Urban Projects, Funding Available, ID 2215-24. Outside, the late afternoon sun glinted off the council building's glass facade. I checked my phone, 45 days, until the hearing. No wiggle room. Then my phone vibrated. A message from Ethan. New document upload. INJ 92406. Provisional injunction filed. Stops construction pending review. A flicker of hope. The injunction could freeze Gordon's crews immediately. But the council's reluctance to extend deadlines meant the fight was far from over. My breathing quickened, fatigue mixing with cautious relief. The 60-day permit renewal deadline loomed ahead. I pocketed the phone, the metal smoker cold against my palm, and felt the ache in my back deepen. The battle was just beginning. The law firm's visitor log showed appointment 753, my name, Marlene Harper. I sat still in the waiting room, hands folded over the worn cane, feeling the ache in my stiff knees. Security protocols had tightened since my last visit. Every entrance required biometric scans, and the receptionist entered encrypted codes with quick precision. The Vale legal team had clearly responded to Ethan's leak. When the junior engineer appeared, his eyes darted nervously. "I'm glad you came," Ethan said quietly, sliding a slim tablet across the polished desk. "These emails confirm the noise data was altered. They pressured our department to clear the permit." His voice was tense, as if he feared being caught at any moment. I studied the screen. Internal memos, time-stamped and signed, showed deliberate manipulation. The information could halt construction if it reached the right ears in time. But Ethan hesitated. "There's more," he whispered. "I want guarantees, protection. I can't face retaliation alone." I nodded, aware of the risks. My weathered hands clenched the tablet, my grey hair brushing the collar of my jacket. I felt the sting of exposure, not just from the danger Ethan faced, but from my own. Every step forward risked legal reprisal or worse. Outside, through the tinted windows, construction crews worked steadily, undeterred by the injunction Ethan had uploaded. The foreman barked orders into his radio, unaware of the battle unfolding in sterile offices. Ethan lowered his voice further. "I'll share access to internal communications, but we need a formal agreement, something legal, binding." I tapped my cane lightly. "We have 40 days until the permit renewal hearing. That's our window." He swallowed hard. "Then we work fast. But be warned, the legal team's surveillance just increased. Cameras everywhere. Even employee emails now pass through encrypted servers monitored by Vale's lawyers." That meant danger for anyone communicating with me. Yet the evidence in Ethan's hands was invaluable. My back ached from tension as I stood slowly, the weight of age pressing against urgency. "I will protect you as best as I can," I said finally. "This community depends on it." His gaze wavered, then fixed with resolve. "Then let's get to work before they realize what's missing." Outside, the hum of machinery continued. Inside, I carried the fragile hope that an ally had joined my fight. Ethan was pulling at Vale's control. But the price was clear. Trust would cost us both, and the legal noose tightened with every passing hour. I left the office with new purpose, the tablet clutched beneath my jacket. My steps were slow, but my resolve firm. The apiary's ruins awaited me, a daily reminder of what was at stake. Vale's construction would not proceed without challenge, not while I still had breath to fight. The ladder creaked beneath me as I climbed to Mrs. Lang's rooftop at 1427 Maple Street. The sun had sunk low, casting long shadows over square metal hives secured behind rusted rails. 5 security guards in navy uniforms patrolled below, their radios clicking with clipped commands. I tucked the modified sound trigger devices into my satchel. Their serial numbers, SN 0424 and SN 0512, clear under the fading light. Mrs. Lang's frail frame appeared at the door, her hesitant voice barely above the hum of bees. "Marlene, you shouldn't be out here with those patrols increasing." Her hands trembled around the railing. I nodded, peeling off my gloves to adjust the smoker clipped to my belt. "I'm halfway through. These devices, they're upgraded. They should cut through Vale's dampening nets." Suddenly, a sharp sting jabbed my left forearm. I jerked back, swatting frantically. A drone of angry bees rose, their buzzing filling my ears as they swarmed defensively. From below came the faint sound of snapping radios, then a guard shouted, "She's on the roof!" Pain flared where the sting broke skin. Swelling spread quickly, the sting warm and sharp. My wrist, already stiff, cramped painfully. I forced myself to breathe steadily and crouched behind the hive labeled B-18. Pulling the small devices from their nests, I inspected the wiring, clear of the new soundproofing Vale's crews had installed just yesterday. A drone zipped too close, colliding with my metal smoker. The tip buckled, spilling hot coals onto the rooftop concrete. I flicked the glowing embers away, the silence thick, except for distant boots and radios echoing below. The sound trigger devices blinked blue twice. ID codes confirmed, 0424 and 0512, dated 05 to 1424. These upgrades allowed them to pick up frequencies beneath the dampener thresholds. I'd tested them earlier in the workshop. Now, in the field, the stakes felt raw and immediate. Mrs. Lang's voice cracked beside me. "They're sealing the site tomorrow. Vale's legal team says the permit's revoked." That was the reversal. My plan to rely on community pressure and legal wrangling just got cut off. Vale was shutting down physical access before the 60-day hearing. The cost of delay was no longer theoretical. The guards had spotted me now. One started toward the fire escape. I grabbed my cane, pain lancing my wrist as I pushed to stand. The sting's swelling made it difficult, but I had to move. The bees circled again, their humming growing louder, more agitated. I tapped the devices together. Signals pulsed strong, overriding the new sound barriers. The bees reacted faster, buzzing in tighter formations near the nests. Vale's attempt to neutralize them with sound had failed. Looking down, I saw construction crews unloading massive black cylinders marked Acoustic Dampener Unit, Model ADU-7, Serial 8773. The foreman barked orders. New cables snaked toward the hives. My wrist throbbed, a wet spot of blood seeping through my sleeve. I swallowed hard, steadying myself. The night wouldn't wait. Mrs. Lang pulled the back door open wider, whispering, "Get inside before they see you." I nodded, retreating past her. The swarm was my shield now, unseen but dangerous. The devices in my bag would give us the edge. As my cane scraped the rooftop's edge, I caught a flicker across the street. A figure watching from a van with tinted windows, its license plate number 8XJ4052 faint through dusk's haze. Vale's reach was wider than I'd thought. My apiary wasn't just under threat. It was a battlefield. The bees stirred, their buzzing vibrating through the night air. The devices hummed low. Tonight, the fight had only just begun. The city council hearing room smelled faintly of old wood and polished brass. 10 days remained until the final decision on Gordon Vale's permit renewal. I sat among a handful of community members, my fingers wrapped tightly around the worn handle of my walking cane. The evidence tablet with Ethan's emails lay heavy in my lap, a burden and a weapon. Vale's legal team attacked every point we raised. Their lead attorney spoke smoothly, challenging the validity of our noise data. "These acoustic readings are inconclusive," she said, pointing at charts that conflicted with the devices I had painstakingly installed near my hives. I watched as the council members scribbled notes, their faces unreadable under the harsh overhead lights. The emotional toll weighed on me. My back ached from hours of standing and sitting in stiff chairs. My weathered hands trembled slightly despite gloves. The exhaustion was physical, but the uncertainty gnawed deeper. If this permit passed, construction crews would return the next day to seal off the site permanently. That meant the destruction of my apiary was irreversible. My years of labor, my connection to this place, gone. The council's legal advisor announced that Vale's team had submitted surveillance footage attempting to discredit Ethan as unreliable and harassed by community activists. The smear campaign was predictable, but it stung. I caught myself holding my breath, steadying my stiff knees as tension filled the air. Midway through the hearing, a surprise came. Lisa, a junior member of Vale's legal team, unexpectedly stood. Her voice was quiet but firm. "I have information that may change the council's understanding of the environmental reports submitted by my firm," she said. A murmur swept through the room. She handed a sealed envelope to the council clerk, who opened it with deliberate care. Inside were internal emails revealing deliberate manipulation of noise data, pressure from Gordon Vale's office to alter findings to favor permit approval. The documents named names and detailed deadlines that forced the consulting team to adjust measurements. The council chair immediately called for an independent environmental audit, suspending further discussion until the results arrived. I felt a surge of cautious hope. The momentum was shifting. My jaw clenched against the fatigue as I rose slowly, gripping my cane. Outside, I would need to prepare for the next move, coordinating with Ethan, protecting the evidence, and rallying community support. Before the hearing ended, the developer's media contacts began issuing statements, casting doubt on Lisa's credibility. Vale's legal team aggressively challenged the authenticity of the emails, deploying media contacts to frame the leak as a desperate ploy. The atmosphere was tense. Every legal step Vale took underscored their reliance on aggressive tactics rather than solid grounds. I caught sight of Mrs. Lang's worried face in the back row. Her frail frame stiffened with resolve. We shared no words, only a glance that spoke volumes. This was far from over. Outside, the cool air bit softly against my skin as my joints protested each step, leaving the building. The path ahead was steep, not only for my body but for the fragile alliance I had built. 10 days until the council's verdict. 10 days to prove that my apiary, my livelihood, could survive this fight. The physical exhaustion was real, but the stakes pushed me forward. The bees depended on it. So did my community. The park buzzed with restless energy under the late morning sun, its warmth blending with the sharp scent of damp earth and fallen leaves. I steadied myself on my cane, grey hair tucked beneath a wide-brimmed hat, the mesh veil over my neck fluttering slightly in the breeze. 60 days remained until Vale's permit renewal hearing. A countdown I felt sharpened in every ache of my stiff wrist and ribs, still tender from recent falls. Today's demonstration had to change everything. I scanned the crowd. Neighbours from nearby blocks, a handful of reporters, volunteers clutching flyers displaying my apiary's photo with Vale's logo crossed out in red. Whispered conversations filled the air, punctuated by occasional coughs from those braving the biting chill. My cracked hands gripped the metal smoker's chamber, filled with smouldering weed, a precaution against the day's mounting tension. The future of my apiary depended on this moment. Before the formal start, a line of construction workers and security guards arrived at the park's edge, unloading crates stamped ADU 7, acoustic dampeners Vale's crews had been installing near the hives. The foreman, in a yellow helmet, barked clipped instructions, clipboard in hand, his gaze flicking repeatedly toward us, a clear sign of the opposition's presence. I stepped forward, voice steady despite exhaustion. Vale's machines have silenced our bees before. We won't let them do it again. I pointed at the crates. These devices are designed to drown out the bees' signals, to hide the damage they cause. But today, we reveal the truth. Voices rose in agreement. I spotted Ethan near the back, shifting nervously, his fingers white as they gripped a sealed envelope. He'd been my secret source since last week's hearing, providing evidence from inside Vale's legal team. Every glance he cast behind him underscored the risk he was taking. Suddenly, security guards pushed through the crowd, cameras rolling. Vale's legal team stepped forward, announcing they were withdrawing the renewal permit application, a public move to disarm the protest while buying time. The crowd murmured uneasily. I steadied my breath. This was expected, but dangerous. Then Ethan broke away, voice clear, but trembling. This changes everything. He held up the envelope. Inside are emails and videos showing intentional sabotage of the bee colonies, altered environmental reports, manipulated data, staged disruptions. Shock rippled through the crowd, whispers swelling into rising outrage. A reporter raised her hand. "Can you verify these documents?" "We have corroborating witnesses and time-stamped footage," I replied, voice gaining strength. "These are internal communications from Vale's legal team. The truth is out." The crowd surged forward, phones raised, cameras zooming. Construction crews froze. The foreman's jaw tightened as officials arrived with local media broadcasting live. The tide was turning. Minutes later, a city representative stepped onto the makeshift stage by the bandstand, voice firm. "In light of these revelations, the council will implement increased environmental protections immediately. This includes expanded oversight of acoustic dampeners and stricter controls on construction near sensitive habitats." Relief washed over me, though the ache in my ribs and the throbbing in my wrist reminded me progress came at a cost. Vale's public image fractured. The legal team scrambled to contain the fallout. My apiary's future, the bees' survival, finally felt within reach. I lowered my gaze to the soil beneath the oak trees, brushing dirt from my gloves. The fight was far from over, but today we pushed back.